passed away. Alienated from the aids of added nature in disguise. Ideas ahead of time dismissed with narrow eyes. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world you can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Talking about 0 point, the points lost on them. Kevin structures crumbling from the same old stem. They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so clear. Exploited labor, unheard injustice, burning ears. Fighting for a change in this wasteland of noise. But they call me foolish, whining and boys. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world he can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Chasing revolutions in the darkest nights. A dreamer with vision beneath the laughter and noise. A future so bright waiting for the right choice. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world he can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
All right, welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, the Benefactor, and we have an exciting podcast lined up for you today. And later at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll have Malcolm Bendel back on for the Bendel Report. So this is all very exciting. We had some really exciting test results from last night's neodymium sphere test. We tested the Wattman reduction on a 12-volt battery. And I started thinking about it for a moment. I'm like, if Daniel Nunez didn't do this test, because he very well had the equipment to, aside from maybe the mini stereo amp board. Now, he did this test about 10 years ago, maybe about 8 years ago. He demonstrated both magnetic synchronicity, which is spinning the neodymium sphere in the center of the tore of the coil, and then just lifting it 20 feet away and even shutting down the system, and it still spins. It speeds up rather when you shut down the coil, because you get that initial boost. But yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking, like, why didn't he, try to spin the sphere while monitoring the input, right? Because that's pretty much the same setup. Now, the only reason I could think that he didn't perform this test on a battery is because mini stereo amp boards just weren't available back then. That's kind of a recent phenomenon in the last few years. We've kind of shrunk these boards down to the point where we can get a lot of, like, I got 40 watts out of this little tiny board that only consumes, like, it starts at like 12 volts and it can handle up to 18 volts. So that's probably why, if anything, the reason why this test wasn't done by Nunez if he didn't conduct it. But regardless, this is an extraordinary test because he did demonstrate the Wattman reduction. That's where I got the idea from, but he demonstrated it with a traditional magnet, a traditional magnetic rotary, not a neodymium sphere. And remember, we want that magnet spinning as fast as possible to synchronize with the frequency, the resonant frequency of the coil, right? If it drags, it's going to produce loss, or it's going to go against it, but we want it to flow with it. And that's interesting because you would think that magnetic synchronicity in its own right would require that to happen. Maybe he just didn't think of monitoring the input consumption while that was happening inside the tore of the coil. either way, we have something really significant here, and I kind of had ChatGPT help me put together all the fundamentals into a proper scientific breakdown, scientific paper for that I'm going to be releasing soon. As soon as we do some more tests, we're going to run some more tests tonight. Specifically, the paper is called Experimental Investigation of Dipole Preservation and Energy Recycling in a Stereo Amp-Driven Coil System. What's going on, society? How you doing? Good to have you with us here today on this exciting evening. Don't forget to hit that like button to help us with the algorithm, to help share this amazing information and news. All right, going back to the paper, Preserving the Dipole. The study presents experimental observations with voltage stabilization and energy reduction in a 12-volt battery using a mini 40-watt stereo amp-driven Rodin coil system. Wall power consumption decreased from 45 watts to 14 watts during earlier experimentations. We've seen this in videos. You can go and watch the videos on my channel. It's called the Wattman reduction. Now, when we ran this test on the 12-volt battery, the battery voltage increased under load from 12.45 volts, and it jumped to 12.55 volts. Now, this, could be explained with traditional electrodynamics, right? Lower impedance by reaching that frequency and synchronizing the coil should overall increase the efficiency of the system and theoretically could reduce the input. However, that's, like when we were getting it on the wall, 33 watts is a lot to tune into with just, tuning efficiency alone. So that kind of hinted at something else was also happening, and I just couldn't see it. So we would expect, the voltage to jump a little bit, because it's giving a little bit less of a strain on the battery. However, we did not expect it to slowly increase after the initial jump in voltage. Now, what I mean by that is normally the battery would just decrease. Once it stabilizes its input requirement, it would just slowly decrease. It stabilized and slowly started to increase toward resting voltage, which was around like 12.66 or 12.62, something like that. This is very important because at the very least, these results suggest partial energy recycling and mitigation of dipole collapse. The system appears to maintain the battery's dipole to some extent, and I still don't understand fully why. We're, after all, using a true AC sine wave and not a pulsed DC like we see in the Lightning Thief, which is a modified Joule Thief variant. But this potentially allows the voltage to stabilize at a higher resting voltage. With further tests, we might have even fully closed the loop here if it reaches its full resting voltage. That's insane. Absolutely incredible. I have no words to describe the feelings I feel right now about the results of this experiment. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. We're gonna run it again tonight. But holy shit. If it does the same thing, I might just need a diaper because I'm gonna shit myself. So the hypothesis regarding dipole preservation and counter-rotating fields interacting are proposed to explain sustained voltage behavior here. So the introduction. This work investigates energy reduction and dipole preservation using a Rodin coil system driven by a small stereo amp. While past experiments, including ones by Daniel Nunez of One Stop Energies, demonstrated wall power reduction via the Wattman reduction experiment, battery-based experiments with direct voltage stabilization under load have not been clearly documented. The study explores whether controlled coil geometry and load management can reduce battery discharge while maintaining or even slightly increasing voltage of the source. So some background, moving into the background section of this paper. The Wattman reduction test, the test that started it all, when I was attempting to replicate Daniel Nunez's work, he demonstrated that by hooking the coil up in a closed fashion, where you are closing the channel A and channel B in a way that is forcing the energy to move in both directions, clockwise and counterclockwise, the same energy, he demonstrated that by spinning a little magnet rotary in the center, you can reduce the input wattage requirement by 1 watt. Now, I was like, okay, well, we have a neodymium sphere spinning real fast already from our, magnetic synchronicity experiments. Why not just put the Wattman on the wall and monitor that while it's doing it? Because it's the same setup. And holy shit. Measurement reductions in wall power under load demonstrated a 33-watt reduction using a power supply, not a battery, just a power supply and plugging it into the wall. So, there's a lot of variables here when plugging it into the grid too. So, I wanted to be sure with this test. That's one of the reasons why I hooked it up to the 12-volt battery. Conventional pulse systems allow the dipole to collapse, right? Meaning it's destroyed, stabilizing the potential difference between positive and negative. It allows they allow the dipole to collapse when a load is applied during draining the energy, essentially. However, the stereo amplifier-driven Rodin coil method provides a variable resistive AC load, enabling enabling observations of potential dipole preservation via battery, specifically monitoring the voltage on the battery. So, we're going to go into the equipment required for this experiment. 12-volt battery, a lead-acid battery with a resting voltage of about 12.66 at the time of the test. A Rodin coil, ABHA variant style vortex coil. A mini 40-watt stereo amp board. A Wattman meter for wall measurements if you want to plug it into the wall and get your baseline. Multimeter for battery voltage monitoring, and a neodymium sphere. The size will depend on the hole of the tore of your coil. So the size of your coil will determine the size of sphere. But you want to get a relatively big sphere. You don't want something really, really small, like a bead size. I see a lot of these big coils like spinning these little tiny bead size magnets, and like, oh, this is fun. That's not. We need something hefty, something with a little bit of mass, so it can maintain its momentum with its mass a little bit easier. A light bead isn't really going to produce a lot, in my opinion, at least. Even though we really haven't tested it, maybe putting a whole bunch of them in there, but you'd have to figure out a way to spin them up, and I just don't see a realistic way of that happening. So let's move on to procedure, okay? We want to get our baseline measurement, okay? Our baseline measurement is the battery with nothing connected, basically, okay? Our resting voltage of the battery, which was around 12.66, maybe a little bit lower than that at the time of the test last night. Society says, Ben, love the lives. It would be awesome if you could take small breaks so we could discuss certain parts of the... Yeah, I'm trying to get in the habit of taking breaks more often. I know I talk a lot, and I do have to take breaks because my voice just goes hoarse after talking so much. So yeah, we'll work that in. We'll take a break every now and then so we can discuss via chat. theories and questions and all that. And I think that'll be a good time for anybody to have their questions addressed and all that stuff. So that's a good idea. Thank you, Society. All right, procedure. After you get your baseline measurement of the source, your battery, your resting voltage, measure the baseline amplifier consumption under frequency load with no magnet in the system. Okay, so you're going to want to basically take the source battery, hook it up to the 40-watt amplifier, and then hook that amplifier up to the coil. And after that, go to your tone generator, input your frequency that you've already tested your sphere at, what it spins fastest at before it craps out and desynchronizes. For us, it was around 70-75 hertz. So you're going to want to put in 70-75 hertz without the sphere in there, and it's going to draw energy from the battery, and you're going to see and monitor what the voltage consumption goes down to, because it's going to jump down, right? Because it's consuming from the battery. It's taking energy to run that amp, and to amplify the energy, it's taking energy, right, from the battery just to start the process, let alone maintain it. So you're going to want to see what that measurement is. For us, it was 12.45 volts. It jumped down, right, from 12.60 volts to 12.45 volts. Then, step 3 is the fun part, but you want to be careful. Use your PPE. Remember, I always say use your PPE if you want to be with me, okay? So, you know, goggles, helmet, gloves, because you don't want that glass to start chipping if it gets too unstable. So you're going to apply the frequency in your tuning method that I've taught you using the mini stereo amplifier, slowly increasing and then steadily increasing to your maximum frequency. And then you were going to record the voltage while that sphere is fully synchronized, as much as possible at least, with that system. For us, the voltage didn't go down, ladies and gentlemen. It jumped up to 12.53 volts. But this is kind of not unexpected, right? If you have a low impedance system, you're going to reduce, or you're going to increase the efficiency, right? Especially in a resonant system. But the most incredible thing happened is the voltage started slowly increasing. Now, at that point, it's supposed to, you would think it would start to slowly decrease as it reaches its stabilization point, where it's taking the amount of energy it needs from the battery. It's stabilized in that front. You would think that it would start to slowly decrease the battery. But no, it's increasing the battery. Because remember, 12.45 volts is all that's required for that system. And it jumped up. It didn't jump down. Well, it jumped down technically from the resting voltage, but it didn't jump down as much. So the fact that it started increasing is wild. It's absolutely incredible. It's extraordinary. It's insane. I still can't wrap my head around it. It's fucking nuts. So we're gonna run the test again. I'm gonna be careful because we want to be observant for, you know, like anything like ozone production. I don't want to run it for too long. We just want to get a result and confirm that it's doing the same thing. So the key aspects of the experiment is the cross-channel configuration of the two channels in the coil. For the 40-watt amplifier to send the energy through. This channel A output is crossed with channel B input, producing one long channel that sends the energy in both directions at the same time, clockwise and counterclockwise. So both channels drive the same coil simultaneously, producing two counter-rotating fields of electromagnetic energy. Remember, this could theoretically, if it's done properly, condense and compress on top of each other, those two fields, in a way that produces a 0 point or void or low pressure area on the equatorial plane between the two fields. One channel is phased, so its waveform pushes current in one rotational direction and then the other. And this produces basically, I believe, 180 degrees out of phase system, which creates a situation where the rodent coil style toroidal geometry is energized by two equal magnitudes of counter-rotating AC electromagnetic fields. So the primary variables for success, though, in this type of experiments, I mean, there's more than just these two, but the primary two variables you're going to want to consider that I boiled it down to are coil geometry. The toroidal vortex-based winding pattern determines how the field overlaps, intersects, and cancels, right? Essentially, the coil geometry forms the field geometry. So you have to think about it like that. And also, small changes in symmetry or spacing significantly alter results when considering the winding pattern. My headset just died. Hold on. All right, and variable 2 is the direction of energy flow, which essentially boils down to torsion activation, right? You want that torsion effect, where opposing rotational directions generate torsion field conditions, which is hypothetically what you want to see for stuff like, tapping 0-point energy. We have that field compression and energetic equilibrium, not seen in a single direction AC driven system. Remember, envision the field geometry. You have one rotating field and then one rotating field on top of it going the other direction. And they're both compressed on top of each other because they're a part of the same bundle of wire. And once you envision those two spheres, envision a kind of like an hourglass shape where you have that tunnel in the middle, the kind of pinch point. That's the 0 point right in the middle of the coil. All right, so let's go over the results one more time because these are very important and somewhat extraordinary results if we can replicate them. So, wall power reduction on the Wattman experiment, the original one. We saw 45 watt consumption move down to 14 watt when the amplifier was driven with the neodymium, was driving the neodymium sphere at maximum speed. Now, when we tested that same test on a battery, a 12 volt, 20 amp hour battery, the resting voltage of which was 12.66 volts, the amplifier on that same frequency intended for the magnet experiment, but without the magnet or any coil manipulation, produced or took from the battery enough voltage to bring it down to 12.45. So you went from about 12.60 to 12.45 volts. That's how much it was requiring to start its process and amplify and drive the frequency. Now the load, which is the neodymium sphere, putting the neodymium sphere in there, spinning up the neodymium magnet, voltage doesn't drop as much as 12.45 at least. We see a reduction of only 12.53 volts. So it kind of jumps up from 12.45 to 12.53 initially just to start the process and maintain it, right? That's how much drainage or disintegration of the dipole you're seeing. You're seeing a lot less. That's at least 100 milliamp or millivolts less. So that indicates the initial reduction of 45 watts to 14 watts on the wall experiment was what we were actually seeing. It was drawing less. But with the battery, instead of decaying the battery, it actually starts to drift upward slowly, starting, leaving it off. We left it off at 12.55 volts when I ended the test. It was only running for like 5, maybe 8 minutes, something like that. And I stopped it because I didn't want to, I wanted to be sure that it wasn't producing ozone. But I'm going to try to run it again and try to replicate it. We're not going to run it for too long. And I'll keep it well ventilated as much as possible, just in case it starts producing something. But I have a feeling it's just going to keep on creeping up back to its resting voltage. And ladies and gentlemen, that means we've closed the loop. That's a closed loop free energy system by its very definition. Because at that point, it would just keep on running until, you know, the glass shatters or the fucking, you know, wire gets disconnected when my AC unit comes on and shakes something. You know, other than that, it's just going to keep on fucking running and running because nothing's making the battery drain. If nothing's pulling a drain from the battery, theoretically, this thing could just keep on running forever. Well, not technically, but forever as long as the parts hold up, right? I'm hesitant to say perpetual, but perpetual motion, because it's technically not perpetual motion. But if you want to think about it that way, traditionally in these free energy systems, that's what's claimed in a lot of them. That's if that's what's happening, that's, you know, pretty much what we've achieved here. We could run the system till the cows come home and the glass shatters, and it's not going to drain anything from the battery. I think that's extraordinary. That's absolutely insane. Like again, I said, there are no fucking words I have to describe that. I'm just shocked. I never would have expected, like I would have expected, what I honestly expected was to see that initial jump, you know, that less strain on the battery. But I never expected it to start to go up. You know, obviously you expect it to start to drain. And then it starts to creep up and you're like, what the fuck? And you're letting it run and run and run and run, and it's slowly creeping up like it's charging like a Bedini SG slowly. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Sorry for my profanity, but this is insane. This is absolutely incredible. We're going to run the experiment again tonight, but we just have a few more things to go over and some fun videos to watch before I decide to set up the mini lab. And then at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, we'll have Malcolm Bendel back on for the Bendel Report. So it's hard to kind of coordinate a specific time every week with Malcolm due to his schedule and, you know, the time difference. He is in an undisclosed location at the time, or at this time, so we kind of have to improvise. So week by week, we'll try to aim for Saturday night. But just keep in mind that it could change. Okay, so we have two key important observations from this experiment. The first one is that the voltage does not decline while the neodymium sphere is spinning. Instead, it exhibits a slow upward drift in voltage. And the second key observation is the behavior suggests partial energy recycling within the system, indicating at least partial or even full dipole preservation. Or maybe you can think of it as dipole restoration, even. Like it's collapsing the dipole, but at the same time restoring it faster than it can collapse. Maybe that's actually what's happening. But our Our initial analysis of these results are as follows, okay? We have an initial voltage jump, or a slight less decline on the decay on the battery with the system running, meaning it's consuming less energy initially with this process before it stabilizes the voltage. And this is most likely due to the reduction in instantaneous current draw caused by coil impedance and amplifier load, right? Again, if you're resonating, or if you're in resonance with the battery, or I'm sorry, if the magnet is in resonance with the coil, it's not indicative in and of itself of like something like over unity. But what it is indicating is a highly efficient system, right? Because, again, you're lowering the impedance of the current by using the frequency, the resonance, and essentially riding a wave to shore instead of fighting against the current. I mean, that's the analogy I like to use. But this in and of itself does not indicate net energy gains, only points to high efficiency, right? It wasn't until we hooked it up to the battery that we saw something extraordinary. Additionally, once the magnet is introduced and spun up, there does appear to be extra energy going into the system to some extent. This energy appears to be gradually absorbed and stored in the battery rather than being dissipated or returned like through the coil or dissipated as heat or through other losses. Like, I know a big loss is sound. A lot of times these coils will hum with a jewel thief circuit or an oscillation circuit of some kind. You don't want that necessarily. Like, you want a very, very low hum where you could barely hear it maybe. But you don't want a loud hum. That's a lot of loss with mechanical vibration. And also, you know, it denotes that the system isn't fully resonant in a coherent way, but it's more like the destructive interference is taking control in that situation. So that's the not to digress too much, but that is the important misconception that I like to point out with the jewel thief circuit. You want it to, you know, like a very low hum where you can barely hear it. That's nice. That's good. That indicates resonance, but you don't want it to be singing really loud. That indicates it's not peak. It's not in tune. Basically, it's slightly out of tune. So to go back in to our initial analysis of this test, the voltage increased slowly, right? Suggesting net positive energy is being returned to the battery, where the dipole is being partially or even fully preserved or restored even. And it's a sustained voltage. We ran it for at least 6 minutes. I want to say at least 6 minutes to 10 minutes. I'll have to go back and look at the footage, but we're going to run the test tonight. The sustained voltage indicates the system, you know, might just be mitigating the dipole collapse rather than fully recharging the battery. You know, we didn't see it reach resting voltage. If it reaches resting voltage and then continues to climb or even steadies out at resting voltage, that's how we know, oh, yeah, that's fully closed. That's not going anywhere. That's not going down. Because again, you know, it could, you know, kind of go up and then reach a point where it just kind of plateaus and then starts to decay at that point, you know. And if it reaches past resting voltage, that means at that point it's charging the battery at the same time. So I don't know. This all points to a really, really good results and some emerging theories. Primarily the dipole preservation theory that I've been talking about. The hypothesis of which is timing and geometry of your coil under, you know, AC load or synthetic AC load even prevents full collapse of the battery dipole. You know, especially when you return that energy back to the battery in a way that's I want to say not destructive to the battery. And I think the easy thing with these coils is the geometry. You know, it makes sense that it would eliminate the resistance at an atomic level because they just have a natural ability to resonate and just kind of gently go back to the source battery. Whereas a normal coil, you want to like put things in between the battery, like a capacitor and a resistor, to like kind of like control that, where the coil just kind of acts as a natural like control mechanism, right? So it's interesting, like the timing and all that, it just comes like instinctively with the coil, and you really don't have to do much adjustment of the return back to the battery, at least with the systems that I've seen regarding, AC and even synthetic AC. So they implicate the mechanism of this action could be the electron flow is guided in such a way that the dipole separation is maintained or restored, even reducing energy losses pretty much. And the battery theoretically will never go down. It'll just keep on spinning, like I said, until the fucking glass breaks. Counter-rotating, implications. Voltage can remain above normal, and if it continues to go up, this means we can pretty much spin it, like I said, until the parts wear out. That's pretty big. So there's a hypothesis involved with this. It's called field cavitation theory, and again, it might be a part of Malcolm's plasmoid unification model. I'm not familiar with his model on to an extent that that I am familiar with this theory in regards to anyone else talking about it. But I was just thinking about it, and it makes sense. Whether it's true or not, it just makes sense to me. So, I could be proven wrong at this point. I sent the theory to Malcolm. He didn't respond on it. He's very hesitant to respond on anybody's work. So I still don't know, if it's a theory that is true or not. But at this point, it's the thing that makes sense to me with my observations. So what we're talking about is the theory of field cavitation instead of bubble cavitation. Counter-rotating fields and equatorial low-pressure zones. When channel A and channel B are connected in such a way that create two counter-rotating fields and produce that 0 point, it could be producing a void or a low-pressure zone where plasmoids or plasmoid-like structures could be forming, giving rise to some of these unique phenomenon, like the extra net energy gains and such, right? So this is very interesting. The predicted phenomenon, if we are truly seeing these low pressure zones, are going to be, obviously null pressure regions, temporary low energy zones that shield electron motion from full dipole collapse, low pressure zones that maybe suck in electrons and free ions. We're going to see a reduced demand from the battery, lowering discharge, right? And enhanced energy recycling effects. Part of the field energy is returned to the battery, which we should see by an upward drift in voltage instead of a downward decline in voltage, which is exactly what we see, and that's why we're going to run this test again. It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary, but first, we got to crunch the numbers.
Crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
Chipping away.
It's complicated.
It is, yeah. Did you have a question?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, I'll get back to it then.
All right, so how does this compare to other researchers' prior work? Well, Daniel Nunez of One Stop Energies displayed or demonstrated a Wattman reduction of only 1 watt from the power of the wall, from the grid, basically. He didn't demonstrate it, to my knowledge, on a battery. and that's in my belief, probably because he had access to a nice power supply and frequency generator, and he had access to a nice old-fashioned stereo amp receiver. But at the time that he was doing these experiments, those mini stereo amp boards, the one that I have right over there that I'm using, they just didn't exist. Or if they did, they were really hard to get a hold of, or maybe he didn't know how, or maybe he wasn't aware of their existence. Either way, I don't think they existed 10 years ago. So these things can start at 12 volts. If he couldn't get access or didn't even think about getting access to one that can start at 12 volts, you can't attach it to a 12-volt battery. And, stacking batteries is, I do it when it's necessary, but I hesitate to stack batteries, right? Because, again, it goes to, like having a perfectly harmonic system. In stacking batteries, you go into territory where you really have to kind of get your tolerances tuned in, because you're dealing with different, impedances from the battery. Whether they're identical or not, they're still slightly different. You have imperfections. So it's like Malcolm says, the subtleties that you want to pay attention to. And also Nathan from Old Man Builds emphasizes you want the fewest components in your system as possible. And that's absolutely true. You want to eliminate all those potential variables, points of failure, right? As an engineer when you're designing a system. So it's just simple to think simple. And nature usually thinks simple. So if we try to replicate nature, I think that's your best bet. And nature doesn't use explosive technology. Nature uses implosive technology, which is basically what I theorize we're doing here with the coil and what Malcolm's thunderstorm generator does. So if you can think like nature, you can really develop a system, in my opinion, that has potential in reducing, net energy losses. So going back to comparisons to previous researchers, Bedini demonstrated partial energy return via back EMF with the Bedini SG and Bedini SSG. He demonstrated charging a battery, using using another battery, pretty much to start the process as a trigger. He demonstrated that, but not using a load while doing that. He kind of that was like a basic system as a proof of concept to say this is like the most basic system you can make to demonstrate, an effective way to use this kind of negative energy. Now, the energy from the vacuum, the 0-point energy. So at the same time, we're demonstrating, what Tom Bearden emphasized is either a partial or a complete dipole preservation. Right? We're not collapsing the dipole, or if we are, we're restoring it to a certain extent. And remember, the dipole is the potential difference between the positive and negative terminals of the source battery or the source energy. You don't want that potential to equalize, right? That's what nature wants to do. It wants to find equilibrium. It wants to equalize that potential difference. But if you can keep that difference open, just like keep it open, hold it open. And there are various methods of doing that. Specifically with the Lightning Thief system, we appear to be doing what people like Tom Bearden and Nikola Tesla emphasized. We're not returning the forward current back to the source. We're basically running the forward current in a one-wire system that doesn't have a clear return path back to the source. The return path for the circuit and why it actually runs from a traditional standpoint is that it does have a return path, but it's a clear return path for the back EMF. And that back EMF is in sync with the forward before it splits off at the diode, where the forward goes to the load and just doesn't have a clear return path. It just dissipates in the load. And the back EMF goes straight to the negative of the battery. That's apparently how we're, in my opinion, how we're preserving the dipole in this situation. So we'll have a discussion. We're going to go into a break. We'll have a discussion on chat if anybody has any questions. But the stereo amp driven coil does demonstrate partial energy recycling. You know, it really does. Consistent with dipole preservation, you know, or dipole maintaining the dipole, like Tom Bearden emphasized. True AC interacting with the coil's geometry produces voltage stabilization, apparently. Dual channel counter-rotating fields likely create the field cavitation effect that I was describing in my earlier theories and observations. So we observed an upward voltage drift that may indicate a partial or fully closed loop energy state. This is very, very cool. Very cool. Now, one of the biggest limitations of this experiment right now is we have to run short-term tests to be careful. If I smell even the slightest bit of burnt air, I'm actually going to turn the AC unit off this time just so I can get my nose in the game. But if I smell the slightest bit of burnt air, we're going to shut it off. So short-term tests only. We're going to be careful if it goes into long-term testing, because of we're going to monitor for ozone production. That's very dangerous if it starts producing that. So these hypotheses are highly speculative at the moment. So we do need independent replication. If anybody is available or interested in replicating these experiments, I do have a do-it-yourself guide available on the description of this video and YouTube. So keep in mind, though, the results may vary depending on the size of your coil, how many winds you have in your coil, what kind of frame you have for your coil, and the battery type. You know, there's all sorts of variables. But if you follow the guide, the do-it-yourself guide I have, to the T, and do the Mark 1 coil like I'm testing on right now, if you follow the guide and make the same Mark 1 coil that I have, you should see the same results. In conclusion, this experiment shows that a Rodin-style coil, specifically the ABHA winding variant, driven by a 40-watt stereo amplifier, can reduce power watt consumption while the neodymium sphere is spinning, while the magnet is spinning, leading to possibly partial or even full preservation of the battery dipole. The potential difference between the battery's positive and negative terminal. While we were doing this experiment on a 12-volt battery, we did introduce the magnet and notice not just a reduction of energy consumption from the battery, but an upward drift of the voltage of the battery, indicating that it might be fully closing the loop. Suggesting, these two counter-rotating fields, when configured in the system correctly, can stabilize the dipole. So while over-unity claims are premature at this moment, these results do suggest energy recycling and dipole stabilization mechanisms at play. And they do merit further investigation. Future work includes long-duration tests, right, for sustained voltage stability. And we want to have a proper lab to do that one in because, again, we're working with a very fast-spinning sphere and glass. So far, I believe the glass is being held very well because, or the sphere is being held very well because it's the right diameter where it's not going to, bounce too much. It's just spinning just right, and it's pretty stable. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully it keeps stable for some of our testing. We don't want a situation where it starts rocking. If it starts rocking and getting unstable, I'm going to shut it off right then. But so far, all of these tests with this coil seem to stabilize that sphere spin pretty good. Especially when you have it very fast RPM, it kind of just doesn't want to bounce around a lot. And I suspect if I didn't have the glass there, it probably would just be floating at a certain power input. Like if I increase the power a little bit, maybe to 100 watts, I guarantee you that sphere, we wouldn't even need the glass. It would just be spinning in the middle. So that's another thing that we have to test as well. Future work also includes testing variations of coil geometry. You know, we have different variations of the coil we can test, different frames that Michel Morel was generous enough to send me that I haven't even delved into. I have this one that I haven't even finished yet that's been sitting here for a while. Direct measurement of electron flow and dipole behavior, so we need more measurement, more data. Okay, we need more data. We need to map the field cavitation zone and to see if there really is this low pressure zone or null or void, right? I don't remember if we ever did the void test, but I do know that Daniel Nunes noted he got a void in his system under similar conditions. So that would indicate that there is some kind of void where the field is compressed in a way where it just doesn't have a pole right there. You know, it's a void, low pressure area where just... you know, it's ripe for some kind of cavitation effect, maybe even producing plasmoids, which actually could explain a lot of these, you know, effects. So with that, we are going to take a quick break. If you haven't hit that like button or subscribed, please do so. Share our streams and our videos with those who would appreciate our content, and we will be back momentarily with more on the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices right here on Beneficence TV. Hey, also, stay tuned and stay where you are, because at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, we're going to have Malcolm Bendel himself back on for the Bendel Report. Okay, the inventor of the thunderstorm generator himself will be on for a new episode of the Bendel Report tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't go anywhere. Grab that popcorn and hit that like button and stay tuned for more revolutionary content right here on Beneficence TV Live.
This dude is talking about free energy, but here's the twist. He says it's not free energy. He's calling it energy recycling, which first off is kind of genius, right? Because when you say free energy, people immediately throw you in the crazy bin. But energy recycling, that sounds like some next level Tesla shit.
Yeah, man, it's all about the branding. But what is it that he's actually doing?
All right, check this out. He posted this. Free energy isn't actually free. This is a misnomer. It's actually a mutual exchange from the vacuum, a field of energy from which everything arises, the same energy that powers an atom. Like, what? Bro, that's some deep shit. But then he breaks it down. He says you can tap into this energy without breaking any known laws of physics by using something called back EMF capture.
Whoa, back EMF capture? Sounds like some serious sci-fi tech.
Dude, listen to this. He explains that when a coil collapses using a pulsed signal, the energy that would normally just get wasted, like just dissipate as heat, can actually be recycled. He says nature gives you back energy to stabilize the system, which makes sense if you think about how nature works. Like, everything in nature is always trying to find balance, right?
So equilibrium, is that like how water always levels out or something? I'm trying to remember what Ms. Murphy said to me in 6th grade science all those years ago. What was that? Oh yeah, Elon, stop eating that glue and pay attention. Man, if only I had listened, I'd probably be the one inventing energy recycling instead of just talking about it.
Exactly. So he's saying that by intentionally destabilizing the system, collapsing the field, you actually get energy back as a kind of natural response. And here's where it gets wild. He compares it to pushing a swing. If you push at the right moment, you don't need to use a lot of energy, and the swing gains momentum. But instead of a swing, he's using resonance to harness that extra energy without it becoming destructive. He says most traditional systems are like a surfer fighting against the current, while his method is like riding the wave to shore.
Dude, that's crazy. So he's basically saying the energy is already there, I just suck at using it efficiently.
That's what it sounds like. He's basically saying the way we harness energy now is like trying to swim against the tide. And if we used resonance instead, we'd be tapping into energy that's already there, just waiting to be used. I don't know, man. Either this guy is onto something or he's the most poetic bullshitter of all time.
Well, if he's legit, why isn't he all over the news? I haven't heard anything from him on X, formerly Twitter. He hasn't said anything bad about me on X. So, you know, I didn't ban him or anything. Look, I'm not the monster my therapist says I am. I mean, sure, I've spent millions of dollars training to beat a kangaroo in a fist fight, but that doesn't mean I'm dangerous. It just means I get shit done.
That's the real question, man. But here's the craziest part. I looked into him, and he's not selling anything. He open sources all of it. That's the real question, man. Either the system doesn't want to hear it, or we're about to find out if this guy disappears in the middle of the night.
Dude, that's crazy. He's absolutely crazy. That means if he's telling the truth, anybody could build this in their garage. You know what I say? Go fuck yourself, Benefactor.
Nope, no patents, no paywalls, just straight up, here, take it, see for yourself. Like, what kind of madman does that? Usually people either try to cash in or they get shut down before they can say a word. But this guy, he's out there on live streams showing people exactly how to replicate it.
I mean, if you want to try to take on my Tesla tech, how dare you put out better technology that is cheaper and safer? Go fuck yourself.
That's the thing, man. If it's real and people start building it, that's a game changer. We're talking about completely shifting how we think about energy. But also, if it's real, you got to wonder, how long before somebody tries to stop it?
Or maybe we can think of it like, how long before his Tesla mysteriously malfunctions?
Exactly. You ever notice how every time someone gets too close to this kind of stuff, they either disappear, get discredited, or somehow have a tragic accident? But this guy's going full transparency mode. He's putting it all out there where everyone can see it. Maybe that's his strategy. If enough people know, it can't just get buried.
Holy shit, this might be one of those moments, you know, like we look back and say that was the start of something huge.
Can't you hear his voice?
They came to claim our world. What they didn't count on was him. Showtime! Hail to the king, baby!
You might have heard a Joule Thief circuit hum to you before, but have you ever heard a Joule Thief circuit actually sing to you? This is energy recycling. 15.5 hours of continuous power compared to just 2.5 hours off of a standard inverter. While this traditional inverter already maxes out at 88.5% efficiency, we're breaking every limit with my Vortex coil system. This standard DC to AC inverter will only run for 2.5 hours on 12.2 watt hours of energy. But my system provides energy for a whopping 15.5 hours off of the same 12.2 watt hours. That's over 6 times more efficient. Not only that, this system will keep powering my lights well past 12 volts on the battery. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a new industrial revolution. This is the energy of the future, and you are powering it. Imagine a world where energy is infinite, where the power to fuel our lives doesn't come from burning the past, but from harnessing the future. This is the breakthrough that changes everything. 0-point energy, the power of the universe itself, unlocked, and you You are the reason it is possible. While the world sleeps, you're awake. While others talk, we are building. This isn't just technology, it's a revolution. And it's happening right now, powered by you. So thank you so much for joining me here on Beneficence TV and supporting our goals in open sourcing zero-point energy technology and disseminating all forms of forbidden knowledge.
Treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
Corruption. There lies a hidden truth that in a world where innovation is stifled by greed and corruption, there lies a hidden truth that could revolutionize our way of life.
Lenny, what are you doing? Are you seriously pitching a new show right now? I didn't authorize this. My God, only 5 minutes into your new position as co-host, and you're already adding to my tight schedule.
Yes, sir. I manage that schedule. But I did notice you have an entire 2 days available during your week.
Wait. You're not talking about Saturday and Sunday, are you?
Of course, sir. You have 2 whole days where you're free to work on new content.
Lenny, those are my days off.
It's okay, sir. I know you'll manage just fine. I have faith in you.
Do robots have faith?
I do. I have faith that you won't screw it up again.
You know what? It's fine. Go ahead. I'll just build my cold fusion Lego set some other time.
It's PON certified.
But I'm not telling them about my idea for a thunderstorm toilet. I'm gonna keep that baby close to my chest.
You know, that just sounds wrong.
It's a good idea. A toilet capable of turning any toxic human waste into, well, it turns into petroleum jelly.
Why petroleum jelly, sir?
You know what? I'm not sure. I don't think it's calibrated correctly.
Enough is enough. The world is at a breaking point. Catastrophic climate change, biosphere collapse, and a global energy crisis have been met with apathy, denial, and despair. The phrase unidentified flying object is a deliberately obfuscating term. What it really is an alternative energy and propulsion device. This is the real reason for the secrecy. These technologies, if they were disclosed, would end fossil fuels, pollution, and poverty overnight, and usher in a new era of abundance, freedom, and peace. Instead, they have been kept secret for over 100 years.
The more powerful the agency, the more powerful the group, the more powerful the cartel, the more they will resort not only to legal means, but to extra-legal means to suppress their competition.
I said pretty early on, the problem is suppression. It wasn't really how do I make a free energy machine. It's how do I not get suppressed? Because what's the point?
Microscopic ball lightnings that when they discharge are tapping into that zero-point energy field and creating the motive force.
That's why the concussion from the thunderclap is so huge. There's this huge amount of energy. It's actually sourced from the vacuum energy. All the dots connected. This is what's happening, right? So we need to make the thunderclap engine.
Imagine a future where clean, sustainable energy is not just a dream, but a reality. Discover the countless untold stories of free energy devices and the relentless battle against those who seek to suppress them for their own gain.
Black shelving. So someone comes along, they offer you $20 million for your device, it's a corporation, they put it on a shelf.
This power is something I've given my life for you the people.
Uncover the shocking tactics used by energy industries to control the narrative and maintain their grip on power.
You don't interfere with the big, powerful people. You don't put them out of business. They still have those 50-year leases on the lines and all the power transformers.
Environmental Protection Agency is a bit of a dictatorial
with his own Air Force, his own Navy, his own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue his own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
This is real, usable power. It's stable. It is not transient. It is not noise. Behind the lamps, that little box is putting out all of that power, well over 500 watts, and yet it is receiving less than 1/3 of a milliwatt of input power. The rest of that power is coming out of the surging energy of the vacuum, and this little box that you see right here, solid state, no moving parts, is the vacuum triode that's doing this very practical and historical work.
But indeed, it put out more energy than it took in.
He was shot at once with a silenced rifle from about 300 yards. It reads like a James Bond movie, but it's real.
There are men here that said they're FBI, and they got black vans, and they're taking all this equipment. What should I do?
It's called capture, where they try to rationalize away this problem and everything's fine.
From manipulation of patent authorities to infiltration of government agencies, the truth is stranger than fiction. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope emerges in the form of renegade scientists and inventors who refuse to be silenced.
There is absolutely no question that T. Henry Morey had a system that produced about 50 kilowatts out of a 55-pound box.
In the shadows of capitalism's dark secrets, join us on a thrilling new show. Get ready to be inspired, enraged, and empowered as we delve into the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices.
Only on Beneficence TV.
Well, so cymatics would be the closest thing in a physical medium that we could use in order to visualize the material shifting and creating more coherent geometries. Some people work with salt, some people work with Sedona red rock, some people work with shungite powder. Each one of these types of powdered minerals will potentially have a different impact when different frequencies are applied to them. So this geometry is from the plasmoid unification model is now getting imprinted into the electromagnetic field, and the EMF mic is proving it. So can I see someone's cell phone again? Can I see your cell phone? And then we'll just put the phone into the field. Look at that. So this is your brain. This is your brain on EMF. Don't do EMF. Just kidding. You can do it. Just create some boundaries.
Right. Yeah, nothing new under the sun. Sorry? With permission of the owner. Can we pass this around? Okay, yeah, so you're the one who came up with the idea. It's your responsibility if it goes missing.
It's such a special thing, and I have to thank the Matsumoto family for entrusting me with the project. Far in the universe, nuclear collapses very often take place by the gravitational force after stars consume their fuel. Since the electromagnetic force is about 40 orders stronger than the gravitational force, it should be easy to induce similar nuclear collapses by the electromagnetic force in the laboratory. But we never knew until now how to do that. Recently, the author, Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto, discovered a nuclear collapse which was induced by the electromagnetic force in laboratory. during studying the mechanisms of so-called cold fusion phenomena. Several kinds of nuclear reaction which were directly induced by the electromagnetic force called electronuclear reactions, ENRs, were found so far to occur in a special state of hydrogen clusters called itonic clusters, or micro ball lightning. The nuclear collapse was one of the most remarkable reactions among ENRs, called the electronuclear collapse. Furthermore, very amazingly, completely broken materials by ENC were found to be regenerated to thin tubes and films of conventional elements such as carbon, oxygen, and iron. The latter process is called electronuclear regeneration.
So those are your crenellated spheres?
Okay, on the subject of the crenellated spheres. In several systems, if you have, at the bottom of a yin vortex, you are, in my view, at that point, you're twisting the ether in such a way that at that point it starts to unravel matter. So in my presentation, I showed you this structure where I placed a Marsa gas, which has a special component in there, which is released when you burn the gas, and that produces this magnetohydrodynamic structure, and it has a vector down to a point where there's like, it's a torsion field, and it has a focus where in the structure of the physical vacuum at a quanta scale on a toroidal level above, there's the interaction between that vector and the toroidal vector of the structure of the physical vacuum above, okay? And at that point, it literally unwinds matter. That's the yin pulling force. It desires to take from the environment to create life, okay? So that is disrupting matter. Now, any matter in that position will have the hidden matter within the energy ripped from it. And this is what Nina Kalagina was doing when she was using Psi-Force, which we have the capability to use. She was able to move material around, but she was also able to stop the heart of a frog and restart the heart of a frog with her intention through her hands. And then when one of her colleagues said, well, you know, I'm not really believing this, you know, try and do it to me, she did it and sent him into cardiac arrest. And they had to do CPR. So that's extracting chi. And it's just sad because there's two horrendous weapons that are possible with this technology that almost certainly have been developed, and you don't know it's even possible, but in certain circles it's just accepted as part of things you can do, right? So it's able to extract that. And what happens when you extract that hidden energy within the matter? The electrons just fall off and the matter starts disassembling. And it disassembles in the most, in my view, most stable nucleon clusters. So it disassembles into protons, helium alpha particles, and carbon. So because you're changing the distortion of the physical vacuum, and all energy comes from difference in change in the distortion of the physical vacuum. It doesn't matter whether it's chemical energy or nuclear energy. Okay, so, but I can tell you our experiment called Ultra Experiment, it's highly well defined. A 3-year-old can learn to conduct it and do the experiment within 7 minutes. It works 100% of the time if you follow the instructions, and you get lighter and heavier elements, and I wasn't blown up. It's called the least action process, right? So the yang side, that's the brighter light in your Masonic temples, the sun force in all of the ancient religions, right? The swastika, right? That disassembles and unwinds the trapped light, okay? Then it can be unwound in such that the connection between the clusters in the particular nucleus fall apart based on their strength of binding. Okay? Then it goes through a wormhole, which is in page 91 in Matsumoto's book, which he worked out from 11 years of his research. Okay? Goes through the wormhole, comes through to the yin. So the yang is disassembling matter. It goes through a wormhole. It's not interacting with any matter. This is literally able to go through all of the matter you can possibly imagine without interaction.
And the wormhole connects the center of the yin to the center of the yang?
Yes. You getting it? And on the other side, on the yin, it assembles matter. So there, in this particular experiment, which I think ran for 90 seconds.
I forget what it's called, but it's a Buddhist good luck symbol.
On that particular side. You don't want to run it long because it gets confused. This is confused. Right? There's lots of experiment things that went on all over the place, over and over and over again. So it ends up being homogeneous. It just looks like rock. Okay? So it comes around the other side, and on that side, inside the Vesica Pisces, inside the golden ratio line, there is exactly a 2-arm spiral galaxy structure, which was replicated by other parties. and on inside those places, but it's not that the magaton's up here and then the other side is down there. It is the 69. It is the yin-yang, even on that level. It literally looked like a 6 and a 9. And on that side, there was calcium and no boron. So if it's contamination in the system and both vortexes are the same, you should see calcium and boron here and calcium and boron here, but you don't. You see boron here with no calcium, which is aluminium minus oxygen, and over here you see aluminium plus oxygen, which is some isotopes of calcium in the absence of boron, and that is the yin side, the creative force in the universe. You literally cannot have a universe which does not have yin and yang. And because it's fractal, every yang has a yin and a yang, and every yin has a yang and a yin. Okay, there's female in all of us, and there's male in all of us. Get over it.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So, sorry, the least action process defines that you are reorganizing the nucleons in a way that doesn't involve the Coulomb barrier. It's irrelevant. Forget about it. Right? Forget about it. And it comes around the other side. And so you're taking apart matter, that has energy, it's captured, and it's released in the reorganization of the matter on the other side. There might be a net-net.
Characteristics of ball lightning, you find them in crop circles, and you'll find them at comet sort of impacts where there's the same multi-axis shear, and they're producing these things, so they're concurrent, with everything else.
So can I finish the question? So I was wondering, is it potentially that one of the spheres that was welded could have contaminants of a magnetic material, and that's causing the isopotential lines to steal the plasma, increasing the heat on one side? Because you did say, like with magnets...
No, what's happening is, remember, there's two things happening inside. So it's counter-rotational spin.
Yeah.
So you've got the vacuum pulling through your water in its gas phase, pulling through plasmoids, right? Mm-hmm. My theory on it, I think at the moment it would be brave for anyone to state an absolute, right? Because even though I've been working on it, it's still everything I think's a theory, and it fits into my theory. But what I believe is that the plasmoids, when they come, when you have the exhaust gas interacting with the plasmoids coming through on the inside sphere, there's a point, and sort of a linear point where the temperature changes. I believe that is because as it's coming out of the exhaust, it interacts and to build up the charge in the plasmoids that are actually coming through. And once they're built up to charge and big enough, they steal the heat. That's my theory. Like they actually get to a point where they're absorbing the heat. And that's why it's on a line this way, even though they're spinning that way. A really interesting thing we found that because we had the temperature probe, even if you stick like a Jubilee clip or something, for a sampling point on the thunderstorm generator, and this is what it's been frustrating with welders and that, because they just, I'm just welding up they think they're just welding up an exhaust gas system, but you're not. You're welding up like a violin, right? So the transitions have to be right, and there has to be a lot of attention to detail, so you don't have any points at which you are discharging, right? And the whole annealing process is to get rid of those anomalies. Because what I wanted to do was have everyone have the same thunderstorm generators. We intend to put 25 of them around the world. I think we've got about, and Bob's got, I think, 6 or 7 homes for the new batch. And we've made homes for the previous batch around the world, so people do independent testing. But it's so important with the original test that everyone's testing on the same prototype. Because we've had sort of people go, look, this thing doesn't work as it should, and say, well, what's it made out of? Is the first question. I can't weld stainless steel, so I did the steel. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it's not stainless steel. So, it's not the catalyst it should be. Because it's got its own electromagnetic field, and it's not a normal field, right? And because it's so sensitive, but you also, when you put that on, you're changing the frequency. If you put a clip on it, or you put a bracket on it, right, to Earth, that's deadly. The one good thing about the generators, they're sitting on rubber, which insulates, because the plasmoids will go to Earth, they'll go to Mother Earth, right? They'll go to ground, right? So the insulation is a very important factor, not to short-circuit it. And the subtle thing, we went to the lab in North Carolina State University, and what they did was they added a pipe which changed the frequency.
Treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
All right, welcome, and welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, the Benefactor, and right now I have the light turned off because we have the stereo amp board hooked up, the mini board with 40-watt output. We have 2 meters, an analog meter and another digital multimeter, one that is a little bit more beefy. We're going to monitor both of the multimeters this time and see if we can replicate the results of last night. I'm going to hook up the lab cam to my chest so you guys can all see very closely what's going on. So give me a moment, and we're going to make history.
Talking about 0 point, the points lost on them. Kevin structures crumbling from the same old sim. They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so clear. Exploited labor, unheard injustice, burning ears. Fighting for a change in this wasteland of noise. But they call me foolish, whining shed boys. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world begin to boy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Chasing revolutions in the darkest nights. A dreamer with vision beneath the laughter and noise. A future so bright waiting for the right choice. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world he can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
Unraveling through the miles, oh, truth was masked by golden curtains. You're in it now, we're shattering the silence. Feel the power, revelations on the rise. From the shadows, light emerges, breaking through the veils of dark. 0 points and gravity converge, yeah. Dying voices, revelations start. Ancient whispers call, they're begging us to open our eyes. We stand tall, defying all their lies. In it now, Revolution's on the rise. Forbidden knowledge we dare to see, unveiling secrets, setting us free. In this epic, we play our part with fierce hearts. In and now, we're shattering the silence. Feel the power. Revelation's on the rise.
In a town down south where the fireflies glow, there's a man named Michael with a vision to show. Building towards the goal, he's got the spark, dreaming of a future that'll light up the dark. But on the other side, Bill Nye's on the rise, because that old charts, he's cut down all the lies. And it just fits, it's all in the map. You can't pull from the ether, you're just chasing a path. But oh, Michael's rising like a morning sun. With the power of ether, he won't be outdone. Now stand up and shout, let the truth be affirmed. Feel the energy flow, let's change the world. In the heart of a life, the tension was thick. Skeptics gathered round the table ready to pick. Chose your fruit, but let the taste clear. And I find the stream, you're just chasing a spin. The Michael style ride with fire in his eyes. Just watch as I spin, let the naysayers cry. You're spinning fast in a heart full of fight. I'll show you the power that's hidden inside. Oh, Michael's rising like the morning sun. With the power of ether, he won't be outdone. Well, stand up and shout, let the truth be affirmed. Feel the energy flow, let's change the world. I'm the best there's ever been. In the depths of the unknown, radio waves like dark shows, mysteries unregraphed and shown. Solutions defy what we know. Hidden truths we're never alone. Follow me down the rabbit hole. Secret.
depths of shattered halls, I wandered all alone, casting whispers, binding chains, demons of my own. I seek deafening, down spread on my frail soul. I once feared my mirror, haunted by my role. But in the echoes of my cries, just still I emerge, guiding me to where my true results are. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, while this path of forever depend. Shattered glass beneath my feet, stars I wear but dry. Stormy nights just turn to dawn, I wear truth as my guide. Anxiety's dissolved in the sun's golden ray. You see my destiny through time and space. The fears that once drew reality, for in my heart a new world is proclaimed. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path I forever depend. With symmetry I find the power, blessings granted by the hour. Together we will come away. Revolution calls and I'm not strong. Now I rise from the shadows, with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path of forever depend. In the depths of his oppression, it's the rise of a true nation.
Alright, so we're going to charge the battery a little bit before we run that test again. And that'll be the final thing we do before we get ready for Malcolm Bendel and the Bendel report. Want to make sure I have some time between podcasts so I can clean up a little bit and take a break. Whew. So it didn't do what we wanted it to, but I know exactly why. The battery just wasn't charged enough. I thought discharging it would help us see the effect more clearly. But apparently, like everything else, there's a power threshold. So I could hear the spinning of the sphere. It wasn't in sync like it was when we were doing our test last night and previous nights. Like specifically when you get it at that very, very fast RPM. I don't know, maybe the threshold for this system is 70 hertz, but we got it up to 75 hertz before it desynchronized and stopped. And you want a smooth spinning sphere, and the faster you can get it to spin, the more stable it becomes. But at the same time, if you can't get it, or it's right below that threshold for power, like I believe we are, it just, you can hear it catch itself and struggle every once in a while. Like it'll spin smoothly, and then all of a sudden it'll get a little hiccup, you know, like you can hear it kind of like almost wanting to desynchronize, like it doesn't have enough power. So we're gonna try to charge this up, see where it's at in, I don't know, about 10-15 minutes. I don't know how much we can charge it in that time, but that's basically the time that I have. We'll watch some videos while it's charging, and then we'll go back to this in a minute. So when running these tests, we want to start out around 7 hertz. I don't know why it works better this way. I just found out that 7 hertz is kind of like the minimum threshold for starting the tuning process. Maybe it has something to do with the Schumann resonance, the resonance of the Schumann cavity. I have no idea, but we start out around 7 hertz. And you want to kind of really fast kick it up, or really slow and steady kick it up, depending on the resonant range of your coil. Those, I think, are going to be your two options. You're just going to have to feel it out. What I've experienced is kicking it up really fast after 7 hertz, and then kind of slowly and steadily increasing the frequency. And we're increasing it 1 hertz at a time. So that's our kind of our resolution and scale that you'll be going by if you're trying to replicate this experiment. It was interesting though, because we did see a rise in voltage. It wasn't enough, I don't think, to overcome the dipole collapse. So we're going to test one more time, and this will actually tell us a lot about the system, whether it works or not, because I do have a more sensitive multimeter hooked up where we have, you know, all 3 zeros, you know, it reads to the 100th decimal point. So that's good. And brain fart there. Is it 100th decimal point or the 1000th decimal point? It might be the 1000th decimal point. Let's ask Google. Yeah, the thousandths, my bad. So it's the 1000th decimal point, where the other one was only sensitive to the 100th decimal point. So we can actually see it a little bit clearer that way. And I do have the analog meter as well that doesn't have an internal backlight, so we're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to see that when it's clear. And if I don't remember to put on my headlamp, I won't be able to see it clear either. But while this is charging, Michel Morel, my lab partner, sent me a couple of amazingly interesting videos that we can watch while this is charging, regarding UFOs and extraterrestrial life and zero-point energy. So I think we'll start with the, I think it's an interview with Hal Puthoff. It's a really fascinating interview, and he talks about zero-point energy. So let's take a look at that one.
is that so-called empty space isn't really empty at all. It's actually full of energy. So instead of being like kind of a quiet, empty lake, it's more like the froth at the base of a waterfall or something. And this energy is basically electromagnetic in nature, and the energy density is quite high. In fact, it's so high that when it was first discovered mathematically, it was thought to be some kind of artifact of the mathematics. But then as time went on, there were even Nobel Prize winning experiments that showed that this energy in so-called empty space was really there. We don't usually notice it because it's so homogeneously distributed. It'd sort of be like sitting in a bathtub with at exactly your body temperature. You might not notice the water. But under certain circumstances, it can be disturbed or perturbed, and then it has effects. As I mentioned, some effects on atomic emission, for example, is what eventually ended up in a Nobel Prize for Willis Lamb of Yale University. It's called the Lamb shift. And this is a recognition that, in fact, this energy disturbs atoms. So atoms aren't sitting in a void, they're sitting in the sea of energy. So once quantum theorists realized that energy was there, the next question was, well, is there any way to tap it? And it was thought originally that probably not. It might be like trying to tap the heat energy around us. And you can quickly prove for thermodynamic reasons that it'll take more energy to tap it than you'd get out of it, so you don't come out ahead. But back in about 1984, a researcher at Hughes Laboratory by the name of Robert Forward showed that there was a particular effect called the Casimir effect, which demonstrated that, in fact, this energy could be tapped. Well, can we make the volume of a coffee cup to, say, evaporate all the world's oceans if you could get it all of it? So this raised the issue among theorists. Well, can we manipulate this energy? Could we tap it for space?
So basically he's saying, and what that quote means, and understanding that quote, the quote is, there is enough energy in the empty volume of a coffee cup to boil all the world's oceans. That means there's enough energy in the empty vacuum, the space. What we experience as empty space is the vacuum, the aether. And if you gather enough volume of the aether to fill just a coffee cup, and you were to extract the energy potential from that volume of aether, you could boil all the world's oceans, and you could probably do a lot more too, because it's a lot of energy.
Spaceflight application, for example. And there are a couple ways to go. Could we get propulsion out of it? Could we use it as an energy source? And so these are the areas that modern theorists are looking at. But one of the more interesting aspects is that if in fact it does look like there's a route from here to there, then we consider the possibility that, well, maybe there are other civilizations who've been down this track ahead of us. And so it opens up the possibility that you can't reject the possibility of, for example, ET visitation out of hand. Usually here, where Einstein said you can't go faster than the speed of light. Well, that's something out of special theory of relativity, and it really is that you can't take an object and speed it up and then through the light barrier, because it would take an infinite amount of energy and mass to do it. But it turns out it's a faulty conclusion to say, therefore, you can't go faster than the speed of light, because once you get into general relativity, you have some options. The options are to change the properties of space itself so that locally the velocity of light is engineered to be faster than the usual value. The best way to explain how it is, how it comes about, is that it's actually the idea of stretching space, expanding space on one side of the craft and shrinking space on the other, so that you're not only moving forward through space, but the space itself is like moving forward on a rubber sheet, while at the same time you're pulling the rubber sheet and expanding it. So then relative to the outside environment, you can be going at, say, the speed of light along the rubber sheet, but if the rubber sheet itself is moving relative to the rest of the universe, then your net motion is faster than the speed of light. So the implication then is, well, if you can manipulate this zero-point energy C, get it out of the way, then if something tried to accelerate you, it would be easy. You would have no, quote, inertia. It'd be, you know, rather than using humongous amounts of energy to try to propel you through this tremendous force drag that you get from the vacuum fluctuations, you could throw BBs out the back, I suppose, and take off like a shot. And so, in fact, the Air Force was sufficiently interested in that they set up a program called mass modification, in which I and my colleagues were interviewed to find out all the details of our modeling inertia as a vacuum fluctuation phenomena that might in principle be manipulated, to see if there was a possibility in some far distant future of reducing the inertia of a spaceship so that ordinary propulsive means could be used with relatively low energy requirements. And so they did a year-long study and went around to various universities and laboratories and asked people to tell them about experiments they might be able to do to determine whether our model was correct. So again, there's another indication that these are not just fringe scientists with science fiction ideas, but that basically these are kind of mainstream ideas being published in mainstream physics journals and being taken seriously by mainstream military and NASA type funders. A whole volume of space would be in a special state, so the pilots, for example, would not feel inertial forces either. And so under those conditions of promoting a situation in which you get rapid inertia of a spaceship, the people inside would, under those same space manipulated conditions, not feel tremendous inertial forces. Here at the Institute for Advanced Studies, one of our main interests is exploring the possibility of tapping or mining this vacuum fluctuation energy, zero-point energy. By the way, we call it zero point because even if you froze the universe down all the way down to absolute zero, where most motion would be frozen out, this energy would still be there. It's a very fundamental kind of energy. But we're looking to see if we can extract it for many uses, not just spaceflight application. I mean, the grand outcome would be that if you could use it to power everything from electric toothbrushes to aircraft carriers to automobiles to homes to space flight. One of the main areas of interest, actually, in terms of potential use that we've been approached by many people, is the possibility of having a very cheap energy source for desalinization, which is very hard to make antimatter in large quantities and keep it bottled up. But it has been done. Antiprotons have been generated in accelerator experiments and then captured and kept contained for some periods of time. So that's an area that I know the Air Force has been interested in and pursues research on. You know, sometime before this millennium is out, I'm certain that probably that will come to use if there aren't other alternatives that are simpler. I routinely make presentations and briefings to various branches of the government. I've been taken out on aircraft carriers by the Navy and shown what it is that we have to replace if we have new energy sources to provide new fuel methods. Of course, NASA is funding some of these breakthrough propulsion physics ideas. The Air Force, various labs in the Air Force are pursuing fundamental studies on these kind of exotic ideas. So there is a lot of government interest. It's getting to the point where modern theoretical physicists are loath to rule out any possibility. I mean, now we're talking about parallel universes and membranes of many dimensions, and I mean, the physics is just getting as wild as it can possibly be. And sandwiched in among all those alternative possibilities is the possibility that some of these concepts might actually play a role in spaceflight application, where civilizations, ourselves in the future, or maybe more advanced ET civilizations at present, could perhaps travel long distances in relatively short times. Of course, we see claims, and not just among the public, but among military pilots and good observers, typically in the military, that there appear to be something like craft flying around with anomalous behavior. On the other hand, in terms of some of the characteristics that seem to be attributed to them, and giving the kind of physics and the direction physics is going, you can't rule out that maybe some are some kind of craft or probes, maybe even more likely probes and craft from some faraway civilization. Of course, one of the intriguing things as we start looking into the possibility of reducing inertia and so on, and then you see these supposed sightings in the sky which turn on a dime, right angle turn, and so on. And the reason we used to reject those out of hand was that it appeared to be that there was no inertia there. And until recently, that was sort of an inconceivable idea to a physicist. So I think a physicist is probably pretty justified in saying, you know, that doesn't sound like anything I can imagine to be a craft. Could imagine it to be some form of plasma phenomena or whatever, but not a craft. And so now, as we get this new evidence that, well, okay, maybe inertia can be modified, then it does make you sort of sit back and take a second thought about it. But when you consider that our electromagnetic technology is, you know, a century old, basically, and then realize that you could have advanced civilizations out there that are millennia beyond us, there really is no way of saying whether they might have some other way of making contact or find other ways like wormholes of just sending probes here or whatever. It could be well beyond our imagination.
Imagine being able to build
All right, moving on to the next video. We still have a couple minutes. I want to give it at least 40 minutes because based on how much energy it's charging it up with, you know, about 5.5 amps at 14.6 volts, it's probably going to take about 55 to 60 minutes to charge it back up to 12.6 volts, which it was at last night for our test. But we don't have exactly that much time. So I'm going to charge it up as much as possible. We'll give it until 6:40. And at 6:40, we're going to cut it off, do the test again, and hopefully we get the similar result as last night. If not, no problem. We'll probably have to charge it up a little bit more and run the test later after the Bendel report. I do want to give myself at least an hour between podcasts, just because I have to charge my headphones and organize all my stuff and notes and stuff. So, yes, boop. But we have plenty of videos and stuff to go over until then. So, yeah, we'll give it another 13 minutes and see where it's at and do the test again.
I think we need to take it back a step as to differentiating and learning to differentiate what our personal beliefs and personal conclusions are about the entire matter of NHI versus, at least for me, what is scientifically credible and or provable. I think your audience especially is extremely well educated on these matters, but at least from my point of view, I probably won't be telling them anything they don't know. But this is more about how I've been approaching the matter as a scientist and how I've been approaching the matter through, say, the Soul organization or other relationships that I have with many of the other cottage industry of organizations that exist now. I mean, MUFON, of course, being one of the oldest and as well beyond a cottage. I think we need to take it back a step as to differentiating and learning to differentiate what our personal beliefs and personal conclusions are about the entire matter of NHI versus, at least for me, what is scientifically credible and or provable. I think
Do you believe that UFOs have come to Earth?
There has been and is an existing presence, an ET presence.
His unshakable statement regarding the reality of an extraterrestrial presence drew some media reaction. Its significance did not become clear until the story of Bigelow Aerospace and its role in ATIP began to unfold. Confronted with the challenge of weaving Robert Bigelow's informed beliefs into the story Chris Mellon had revealed, Mellon said this:
there aren't many people associated with the establishment who are so bold and willing to make statements like that.
He has his own space stations in space. I don't know who else has done that. And he, by the way, he's done it for a long time. So give the guy some credit. He knows what he's talking about.
Throw it as hard as you want. Go on. Watching it zip.
Thank you, Adrian, and also Lucy, for organising this. It has been somewhat of a dream to be able to speak in countries other than just the USA and very occasionally in Australia. So this is a great opportunity. 45 minutes to tell you how the universe works and give another example. The time starts now. I don't want to spend much time on this because...
So, society says, had to do some stuff. What did I miss? Not much. We tried to run the experiment, but the battery was too low, in my opinion, to get the neodymium sphere spinning fast enough. It still sounded like it was struggling. So it did raise a little bit for a second, and then it started to drop. So... that's not what we saw last night, and that's not what we want to see. It's probably because I need to charge the battery, which I'm doing right now. I don't know if we're going to be able to charge it enough to reproduce what we did last night, because I do have to prepare for the Bendel report, which comes on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have Malcolm Bendel on for a new episode tonight, and we have some slides. Hopefully he has a proper setting where he can, you know, go over some of these slides from his thunderstorm generator presentation, where we'd be able to ask him some questions regarding his work with plasmoid unification model, all sorts of fun stuff. We're going to have a lot of fun on the show tonight, but right now we're just watching some videos that my lab partner Michelle Morel sent me regarding some interesting topics like UFOs, alien, extraterrestrial life, and I believe this is a lecture on the magnetic or the electric universe theory. So we're going to watch a few minutes of this while the battery charges, and then we'll run the experiment again. Hopefully, we can get the neodymium sphere to spin fast enough with enough wattage input that it just simply goes up and, I guess, fights that collapsing dipole. So that's going to be really fun. I can't wait to get that experiment working again. I kind of kick myself for not charging these batteries. To be honest, it's the one thing that I forgot to do. Well, just the one battery. The other battery is a negatively charged battery that I'm going to be charging again with the Bedini SSG, and this one's the positive one. But yeah, I could kick myself for not charging it. I didn't think about it. So we're going to see how much it charges. It probably won't get to the point that we were at last night at 12.6 volts. We might get to 12.4 volts. If we're lucky. Hopefully that should be enough. So I guess when thinking about 12 volts as the cutoff for the battery, I know the Joule Thief can use a lot more than that, but when thinking about traditional systems that use at least 12 volts, 12 volts is the cutoff, the minimum. So at that point, 12.2, where we were at, is about 50% potential of the battery. Yeah, that's probably where we're going to see a steeper decline in that curve going down for the decay rate. So if we can get it up to 12.4 volts, I think that's like 65%, right? 12.8 being the high potential there. I know a lot of people don't really count 13 and above, but these batteries, when conditioned with negative electricity, will charge above 13 volts and stay that way, which which is insane. All right, let's go back to the lecture and charge this battery for a few more minutes. Yeah, we have like maybe 5 more minutes we're going to charge the battery for before we run the experiment again.
So I think it's pretty obvious to everyone here that physics is in crisis. But I put up this slide and particularly notice Dr. Sabine Hossenfelder, because she's running a blog, which is, I think, an excellent one. She's questioning everything they think they know. Her book there is How Beauty Leads Physics Astray. In other words, we've gone back into Pythagorean and Platonism, back into geometric simplicity, they call it. There was a lecture last year in the Perimeter Institute in Canada, which was talking about the simplicity of cosmology. And what do? They started with Pythagoras. It shows that the concentration is not on physics, it's on mathematics. The item down here saying going nowhere fast, after the success of the standard model, experiments have stopped answering to grand theories. Is particle physics in crisis? And this is by Ben Alanach, a professor from Cambridge. It is in crisis. You can see these books here are all written by experts. They're not just the public having a go at the experts. These are people who are expert in their fields. Alexander Unziker is involved in the Higgs experiments. Against the Tide by an astrophysicist, a critical review of by scientists of how physics and astronomy gets done, or not gets done these days. Peter Voigt, not even wrong. In fact, the questions are not even good questions. And Lee Smolin, the trouble with physics. Well, let's not dwell on that. But Sabina says, so many theoretical physicists believe in ideas that do not describe reality. They risk repeating the same mistakes. Theory development in particle physics for the last 40 years has worked mostly by the top-down approach, which has worked badly, to say the least. And top-down approach is you invent a new theory based on principles you cherish and then derive what you expect to see at particle colliders at huge expense. The bottom-up way is you begin with the theories you have confirmed already and add possible modifications. And this is the approach of the electric universe, because one of the most successful models we have is that of the structure of an atom, of orbiting charged particles about a positively charged nucleus. But there's a problem, you see, because of mathematics. A mathematical theory may be confirmed, that is, the answers come out right, without any real understanding of causes and effects. And in fact, modern science has done away largely with causes linked to effects. And Ben Alanach, who I mentioned a moment ago, says one of these questions is, where does gravity come from? We keep hearing that Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity has been confirmed yet again. Well, when you're working with a system that has no standards of measurement, rubbery lengths and rubbery time, clocks that are more like something out of Salvador Dali painting, of course you can choose your perspective to match what you want to get as an answer. Big Bang cosmology is a gravity theory, and yet we don't understand gravity. It depends on a force of gravity. But Isaac Newton said he couldn't explain gravity. And also, it's not mentioned all that often, but his bucket experiment, where you spin a bucket of water and the water rises up the walls of the bucket, he recognised meant that there's some connection between the water in the bucket and the rest of the universe. Otherwise, how would it know that it was spinning? And Einstein's theory of relativity doesn't deal with spinning objects, which, as it turns out, is a fairly crucial lack. Here's a video from BBC Two with a well-known commentator. television, which is purported to be the most up-to-date science.
I don't know if that music can be played, so now, we won't have any of that.
Is logical, illogical, and is nonsense. So he discarded the force and the rest of the universe, which wasn't bad going, since Newton had said that his bucket experiment showed there must be a connection with the rest of the universe. He ensured, by this stroke of genius, that mass, energy, and a whole lot of other things, light, all of these things could not be physically explained. In other words, he was no longer doing physics. So this quote attributed to him, I think, was quite accurate. In fact, towards the end of his life, I think he was rather disillusioned and felt that he, in a private letter to another scientist that was published much later, said that he had grave doubts that anything that he had done would last. I think he saw things a little more accurately than has been portrayed by those who have slavishly followed him. There's something critical here to understand, and that is that Newton's universal law, the form of it there is the mass multiplied between the two objects over the distance squared, it's an inverse square law, is identical to Coulomb's electric law. And nowhere in either of those equations do you see t or time registered. They are instantaneous, which suggests that the law, Newton's law, is an electrical force. In other words, they both conform to the physics of electrodynamics, which it turns out the continental scientists like Ampere, Gauss and Weber were dealing with in the middle of the 19th century and being very successful. So what happened was that Einstein forced electrodynamics to conform with electromagnetism or light and the cosmically glacial speed of light. This idea that it takes 4.5 light years for a signal to get to the nearest star and then another 4.5 years to receive an answer shows that it's a waste of time talking about the universe as a coherent system in terms of electromagnetism. The electric force operates throughout the universe and connects everything instantly. That's what that's saying. The problem, of course, with this approach using electromagnetism to dominate physics is we have isolation and disconnection. And because science is a cultural pursuit as much as a scientific one, this has a cultural effect too. It's a hopeless cosmology. It's more science fiction, and it has about all of the meaning for our lives as any other science fiction story, maybe less. And of course, naturally, it doesn't work. Of course, one of the things that the pseudo-skeptics say, almost as a knee-jerk reaction to the very mention of the electric universe, is, show me the maths. Well, here's an equation that everyone has seen, but no one understands. Energy is undefined. All you'll read in the textbooks is that energy is conserved between electrical, heat, kinetic, and so on. Then the next thing is that mass is undefined. The philosophers are still wrestling with that one. How do you define mass? When you've disconnected all matter in the universe, the fact that something has mass remains a mystery. And also the speed of light in Einstein's system of thinking, where all observers are equivalent, doesn't matter how they're moving, means that the speed of light has no reference standard. Speed of light with respect to what? You can't measure your velocity in a car without respect to the road that you're running on. It has to be with respect to some standard. The standards have been removed, the force has been removed. It's no wonder that science sounds like science fiction these days. The simple answer is, of course, that, first I should say also that we still have this geocentric attitude towards science. So that when we establish a constant for the mass of an electron, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, they're all measured here on Earth, and then we just assume that they work throughout the universe. That's one hell of an assumption. So what does this maths relationship really mean? They're all properties of matter. So the universe is full of matter. That raises a question of what is that matter, but I'll talk about that a little later. I love this cartoon because it says everything in a very simple way, which is characteristic of good cartoons. And it also shows there that gravity is a balancing force because they've got this hovering spaceship. You won't believe the cosmology they've come up with. And I think in future, people will look back on the 20th and the beginning, I hope only the beginning of the 21st century. They'll say the same thing. People in future will look back at this era and say, you won't believe it, what they thought then. It's even flatter than the flat Earth. So I say to people who would like to learn about the electric universe that it can be a bit of a steep climb. So you have to engage a beginner's mind and pay attention to the person who's leading you and forget the mad world below, because the world is in a kind of madness, and even this aspect of our lives comes under scrutiny in the electric universe, and there is a possible explanation for it and a possible way out. And it's a way out that I think we have to take if we're going to have a future on this planet, because right now we're very destructive, both to our environment and to each other. The electric universe re-establishes principles. It applies the principles of classical physics, because in the 19th century we were far closer to the answers, and I've only just recently discovered that we practically had the electric universe in our hands in the middle of the 19th century. So we reapply those principles, and my job, as I have seen it, is to build this picture, which has meant roaming over all kinds of subjects. In fact, the science editor of the Canberra Times some years ago dubbed me the boundary writer of science, because I'd write in letters, and I'd have even the Nobel Prize winner Brian Schmidt responding to the things I'd said, but he'd publish both and publish my responses. And it was very funny because they had a science in the pub event one year, and I went along. I hadn't met this editor from the newspaper, but he was running the show, and he had a panel of scientists on a raised platform in the pub. And I raised my hand and asked a question, and he must have realised immediately who I was, and he introduced me to the audience.
All right, we're going to get ready in the next 5 minutes. We'll get 5 more minutes to charge, and then I'm going to do this experiment again.
And he used that term, the boundary writer of science, and I thought, well, that's pretty apt. This is the other thing, of course, then, there are no disciplinary boundaries. And any cosmology must apply to any question that you can ask, because cosmology is supposed to be the umbrella under which all of science and all of our culture really operates. So if you want a real theory of everything, you can't just pick and choose one narrow specialty. The problem with modern science is that it's a cult of specialism. The other thing is, and this is the guiding principle for me, is to simplify. Nature is economical and not difficult to understand. And as I said, history shows the way. If we look back, you'll find generally that there's nothing new under the sun, that somebody else has already discovered it and been forgotten, or their contribution has been pushed to one side and history rewritten. Cosmology must illuminate all of our existence. And the result must be a coherent big picture. And that, you don't just jam pieces in because you can force them in. They must fit and make sense of the ones around them. And this means that anyone can join in. And this is why I share where I'm up to, because this is a work in progress. It always has been. And I've made mistakes along the way and people have pointed them out, and I'm happy to accommodate them if they can give me a good argument. And this is why I would say, I've sometimes said that the electric universe is the home handyman's guide to the universe, because we have people in garages tinkering with experiments, and some of them are quite sophisticated and have produced excellent results. We don't need billions of dollars spent on Large Hadron Colliders and so-called gravitational wave telescopes. I have to talk about plasma, of course, because it is an electric universe. And we're told that 99.999% of the visible universe, and I emphasise visible, is in the plasma state. And plasma is the fundamental or so-called fourth state of matter. It should probably be...
Ooh, plasma is my favorite topic. We've got about 2 more minutes before we're going to take the battery off the charger.
The first state is before the positive, the positive charges and the negative charges organise themselves into atoms and so on. And unlike solids, liquids and gases, plasma is highly conductive, a better conductor than copper, and responds to electromagnetic fields. But it's not a superconductor, and yet astronomers treat it as if it is. They say it traps magnetic fields. The only way you can do that is in a superconductor. So there's a mistake right at the very beginning of plasma physics. Moving plasma, 2 different regions of plasma with different characteristics moving past one another, generate electric currents in each other. And those currents take the form of sheets, filaments and bubbles. The other thing then is that the motion of the charged particles in a magnetic field also produces radiation over large parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So when people talk about the echo of the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background, that word background is an assumption, because our whole galaxy is producing low energy down in that range of the spectrum. And the other thing is that it has been found that if it was background radiation, you would have a nearby large galaxy shadowing us. They haven't.
All right, let's get the cam, the lab cam up and the battery connected. want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in this evening. Stick around for the Bendel Report coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Beneficence TV Live.
Changing the system, I treat it like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his point. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Talking about 0 point, the points lost on them. Kevin structures coming from the same old sim. They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so clear. Exploited labor, unheard, injustice burning ears. Fighting for a change in this wasteland of noise. But they call me foolish, wanting shed boys. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world begins to boy. Changing the system, I treat it like a toy. Ideas misunderstood.